How well do you know your neighbor? According to security experts, the answer to that question may save your life. With this in mind, the president has launched the Nyumba Kumi initiative, urging Kenyans to know their neighbors and what they do. Will the system work? Only you can determine that. Oh yes.
Hodi hapa.
Sasa ni nani kwa mlango yangu jo?
Hodi.
Sema nikusaidiaje?
Yes, habari yako jirani?
Mimi niko poa, sema bana niko joba.
Okay sawa. Mimi nilikuwa tu nataka kujua wewe unafanyaga kazi gani neighbor?
Mimi kuna watu sema mimi ni senator, lakini hata ukiniangalia hebu ni cheki. Mimi ni material ya senator.
Okay, hapana. Yenyewe wewe haukai.
Hivyo ndivyo mimi nasema. Mimi mwenyewe upenda kujiita informer hivi unacheki. Mimi ni informer. Unaja kuchukua mapicha hivi unajua? Na usiulize ni picha gani, hiyo ni swali upuzi.
Baby, so you come to sorry. Aki senator, si ukuje tumalizane na hizi picha.
Zile za Photoshop si ndio? Okay, najua.
Wacha tufanye ni picha gani hizo?
Wewe wacha kuuliza maswali za upuzi unasikia? Toka hapa hivi ndakupiga mapla ndakushika makini na kitu hapa hivi unasema.
Pole senator. Guy. Ni sawa.
Toka hapo usiulize maswali zote na ndakuchapa.
Woi.
Kuona hapa.
Subscribe to XYZ's new YouTube channel www.
In a bid to increase trust and confidence between the police and members of the public, the government is seeking to initiate new security structures, and it's been dubbed as Nyumba Kumi.
The government's idea of identifying one's neighbor under the Nyumba Kumi initiative is ideal.
The Nyumba Kumi project that the government implemented in Kenya, which means like in every plot, like 10 houses, like you have to know each other, you have to know your neighbors.
Wanaitega Tola. Na about the exhibition is about ni nyumba yangu, ni how am I. What happened is tulikuwa we were just discussing with my friend then and ni msanii tu mwenzangu alafu tuweza kubishana about Nyumba Kumi.
From where I come from, it hasn't started working. And but from what people say, what I've heard people say is like it will never work because not like someone coming to your house to see what you do, how you live is like wanaitaga utiaji. Ni kama utiaji ati mtu anakuja kwako kuangalia venye unaishi yani.
Kwanza tulidifa. Men disagree to agree alafu tukasema wacha tukae chini because wacha tukae chini tuandika nini chini alafu tukona wacha tuandike about Nyumba Kumi. Hizi stories za terrorist na nini na vitu bomb za kulipuka bomb zinalipuka huko. Sasa kuwa tufanye kitu na best mine.
My name is Gudhia Maina. Nyumba ya Tola is a little house in Kibera. Now the idea is to transpose that house to here. The essence of it, the visitors, and how the system of Nyumba Kumi works. We want to bring this idea here.
It will be a great betrayal for any one of us to pretend oblivion while next door someone is assembling bombs, hoarding illegal weapons, or detaining a kidnapped child.
We need, for us, the artists, plus the audience to participate. It's an interactive show, so there's a lot of interaction, and so the audience will contribute. So we can't really predict what happens in this show. This is an investigation, this show. Like, how do you feel about that? Or does this thing occur in your area? Do you think it works? Do you think it's okay? Have you researched on it? So we haven't. This is a research. The show itself.
Remind the country that security forces are up to task and will demonstrate their prowess in and across our borders.
The first rule of security is vigilance. We must know everything and everyone around us. We must all embrace the Nyumba Kumi plan and ensure that you know at least 10 households around your residence well.
In the book The Origins of Totalitarianism, Hannah Arendt describes the rudimentary mass surveillance system used by the secret police force of the Russian Empire. Every suspect was noted on a large card in the center of which his name was surrounded by a red circle. His political friends were designated by smaller red circles, and his non-political acquaintances by green ones. Cross-relationships between the suspect's friends, political and non-political, and the friends of his friends, were indicated by lines between the respective circles. This system was limited by the technology of the early 20th century, but theoretically, a gigantic single sheet could show the relations and cross-relationships of the entire population, and a network of this type Arendt called the utopian goal of the totalitarian secret police. This goal, however, was not utopian. This goal has been achieved, and in many ways, far exceeded.
Lately, strange new things sometimes appeared in the sky. Noisy birds that flew without flapping their wings. One day, something fell from the sky. He had never seen anything like this in his life. It looked like water, but it was harder than anything else in the world. He wondered why the gods had sent this thing down to the earth. It was the strangest and most beautiful thing they had ever seen, and they wondered why the gods had sent it to them. Albo got his finger stuck in the thing, and the children thought he was very funny. At first, he tried the thing out to cure thongs. It had the right shape and just the right weight. It was also beautifully smooth and ideal for curing snakeskin. And Carbo discovered you could make music on it. And every day they discovered a new use for the thing. It was harder and heavier and smoother than anything they'd ever known. It was the most useful thing the gods had ever given them, a real labor-saving device. But the gods had been careless. They had sent only one. And now, for the first time in their lives, here was a thing which could not be shared because there was only one of it. Suddenly, everybody needed it most of the time. A thing they had never needed before became a necessity. And unfamiliar emotions began to stir. A feeling of wanting to own, of not wanting to share. And other new things came. Anger, jealousy, hate, and violence. He was angry with the gods. He shouted, "Take back your thing, we don't want it. Look at the trouble it brought." But the gods did not take it back. He shouted, "You must be crazy to send us this thing, take it back." Then he shouted, "Look out, look out!" But he spoke too late, and the thing felled his daughter, Kani. He carried the thing away from the shelter and buried it. That evening, there was no laughter and no chatter around the family fire. A strange feeling of shame had come over the family, and they were very quiet. He said, "I have buried the thing. It will not make us unhappy again."
Technology, a child of modern science, is out of humanity's control, has ceased to serve us, has enslaved us and compelled us to participate in the preparation of our own destruction. To be effective, a mass surveillance state requires the coexistence of two systems, a system of surveillance and a system of control. In his book Private Lies in Public Surveillance, James Rule defines a system of surveillance as consisting of those activities having to do with collecting and maintaining information, so that those in charge know when rules are being obeyed, when they are broken, and, most important, who is responsible for which. Systems of control, on the other hand, consist of the actions, procedures, and mechanisms used to enforce the rules, norms, and laws of a society. Or in the words of Rule, a system of control consists of the actual management of behavior through sanctioning or exclusion. In the mass surveillance states of the 20th century, be it the Soviet Union or East Germany, police forces, spies, civilian informants, judges, and jailers were the key players in the systems of surveillance and control. But in modern surveillance states, these systems are augmented by a peer-to-peer component. No longer are political suspects, dissidents, and others deemed to be enemies of the state, merely watched by police, followed by spies, or reported on by informants, and no longer are judges and jailers the only ones to dole out punishment. Rather, we live in a world transforming into a panopticon type of open-air prison, where the many watch the many, and the many punish the few. The panopticon is an architectural creation of the 18th century philosopher Jeremy Bentham, and as Weissman explains, the core of the panopticon's design consists of a roundhouse with prison cells encircling all sides, visibly open, light shining upon them, and stacked on top of each other to form circular walls. In the center is a watchtower, which is cleverly installed with a combination of Venetian blinds and mirrors, so that inmates in their cells, all at an equal distance from the tower, can never be sure if they are being watched by the guard. A smartphone in every pocket, smart devices all around us, and all constantly connected to the internet, has created a variation of the panopticon that does away with the need for any special architectural design. We are surrounded by a public who embodies the potential gaze of guards. At any moment, our actions can be recorded by another person and displayed to hundreds, thousands, or even millions of people for quick, and sometimes ruthless judgment. The panopticon, broken free of its physical architecture, writes Weissman, is a paranoid delusion made reality, as anyone may potentially be watching at any time, at least as soon as one steps foot out the front door. In this panopticon type of peer-to-peer surveillance society, we become, in the words of Michel Foucault, the principle of our own subjection. Always knowing that our words and actions can be recorded and uploaded to social media leads to the emergence of a new form of justice based not only on the punishment of transgressors, but on preventing even the possibility of wrongdoing, by immersing people in a field of total visibility where the opinion, observation, and discourse of others would restrain them from harmful acts. Or as Weissman explains, through the state of constant uncertainty over whether one is being watched, we ultimately internalize the gaze of the guard, and in a sense become a guard over ourself, constantly monitoring, judging, and correcting our behavior, and eventually thoughts and attitudes.
London in the 80s was a weird time. It was a weird place to grow up. It sort of, Alan Moore built V for Vendetta out of that moment. And the English police have always taken a very sort of dimmer view of control and surveillance, even in America. And so that idea, I remember the cameras going up even in the 80s. Mm-hmm. And it was an attempt, I think at the time, to control hooliganism. That's sort of where it started. Mm-hmm. Soccer stadiums, football stadiums, and then spreading out to the rest of the city. It just taking the panopticon technology, which actually, ironically, we modeled the prison in The Prestige on a prison in London, Victorian London, called the Birdcage, which is one of the first panopticons, right? So panopticon is building a prison around a central viewing chamber, so that the idea being you don't know if they're watching you, but at any given point they could be watching you. And it's a very powerful mechanism of control. And we've just, London then took it, or England, Scotland Yard took it and applied it to the city. No one was watching those cameras. Half the time they weren't even plugged into anything. But when you're 16 years old, that you don't know that. So it was a strange time, and I think the post that followed us to the United States after 9/11, right? After
9/11 is a kind of jumping off point for the series in some sense. It sort of inspires the creation of the machine, and again, the fraught sense of the creator, unsure about what he's built, at kind of the seed that started in Dark Knight, which I thought was really fascinating.
Yeah, I wasn't done with that idea.
Yeah.
Bruce Wayne was done with that idea. I was like, no, we need to get a little deeper into that and kind of figure out what's happening.
Beautiful, isn't it? Beautiful, unethical, dangerous. You've turned every cell phone in Gotham into a microphone.
And a high-frequency generator receiver.
You took my sonar concept and applied it to every phone in the city. With half the city feeding you sonar, you can image all of Gotham. This is wrong.
I've got to find this man, Lucius.
At what cost?
The database is now key encrypted. It can only be accessed by one person.
This is too much power for one person.
That's why I gave it to you. Only you can use it.
Spying on 30 million people isn't part of my job description.
This is an audio sample. If he talks within range of any phone in the city, you can triangulate his position.
I'll help you this one time. But consider this my resignation. As long as this machine is at Wayne Enterprises, I won't be.
When you're finished, type in your name.
Uncertainty.
Romeo.
Zulu.
Family.
Alpha. Mark. Reflections. Juliet.
Oscar.
In this scene from Person of Interest, a confused John Reese answers a call on a payphone and is greeted with a set of voice clips. Neither he nor the audience knows what to do with this information just yet. But to break down what's going on here, and in the show as a whole, we first have to learn a bit about show creator Jonathan Nolan, and how his lifelong awareness of technology has shaped his work. That awareness started while growing up in 1970s London during the Troubles. The Troubles was a violent 30-year conflict in Northern Ireland, between groups that had different viewpoints on separating from the United Kingdom. The British Army got involved, and it became their longest campaign ever. In response to the ongoing violence on the streets, the British government went to work setting up more street cameras so more people could be tracked in real time. He then moved to Chicago in the 1980s, where he found the surveillance presence in America to be scarce compared to where he just came from. But that entire narrative shifted after 9/11, when the US government signed the Patriot Act into law, giving it the power to collect and monitor people's private information and track any and all activity on the internet. Surveillance programs like PRISM expanded its ability to collect internet records, and devices like smartphones have made it easier than ever for people to be tracked.
Google has had for many, many years known far more about us than even it knows what to do with. It can see, because its core business is telepathy, basically. What do you want to buy? But you get all sorts of other information that comes out of that.
Through the movies he's written for his brother and the shows he's made for himself, Jonah, as he's known, has made his interest in the potential uses of tech and artificial intelligence clear. Whether that be Batman using a cell phone sonar network to track down the Joker in The Dark Knight, or NASA using box-shaped robot assistants in Interstellar. But in between writing movies and adapting Westworld for TV, he created Person of Interest, an original network show, to show how AI and surveillance technology invade people's privacy on a daily basis. It followed the ex-CIA agent Reese, tech billionaire Harold Finch, and a team they formed to stop premeditated crimes in New York City from happening. But the real focal point of the show is the machine, an artificial superintelligence of Finch's creation that used cameras and online databases to provide the social security numbers or numbers of people in trouble. From the beginning, Nolan and his creative team wanted to give the machine as much complexity as they possibly could. This leads us back to the payphone scene, from the Season 2 premiere, The Contingency. In the episode, Reese learns that the payphone messages are how Finch receives new numbers, something he learns after Finch is captured and can't give Reese the number himself. He finds that the individual clips represent titles and author initials from 3 books back at the team's base, which is a library owned by Finch, and combined,
Finch, you sly dog. The Dewey Decimal System. That's how the machine gives you the social security numbers.
The voice clips may sound random or pieced together,
Family. Alpha.
but in a Reddit AMA from 2011, Nolan revealed they're from a recordings archive called the Conet Project. The Conet Project recordings, released in 1997, are a collection of coded radio messages that were sent from intelligence agencies to deployed spies. Messages he repurposed to give the machine under the radar-like quality.
Kilo.
Thank you.
Much like Batman's sonar network,
This is too much power for one person.
the machine presented the ethical dilemma of spying on people for the greater good, something Nolan used Person of Interest to explore in depth. He approached that problem in a network TV-friendly format by taking inspiration from shows he watched growing up, most notably The X-Files, which he considers the benchmark for balancing standalone stories with a serialized narrative. From there, picking the show's setting was pretty easy. As of Person of Interest premiere in September 2011, there were 3,000 cameras in New York City's Lower Manhattan area alone, which coincided with a rapid decline in the city's payphones. These two trends lent themselves nicely to a world where the machine could collect and share information without being discovered. They also informed the way the show was presented. With a large number of cameras covering every square mile, any one of them could be used to transition from one scene to the next, and establish an overall point of view for the machine in the process.
Freedom is good, but security is better. That's what Thomas Hobbes believed. He made his point by imagining what it would be like to live without government, laws, or society. In this state of nature, you could do whatever you wanted to, but anyone else could do whatever they wanted to you. You'd have plenty of freedom, but you'd live in constant fear. It would be grim. You wouldn't be able to trust anyone. Even the weakest could kill the strongest by stealth. It would be difficult to cooperate, or even survive. Life, Hobbes claimed, would be solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. Anyone would do whatever they could to avoid living like that. Hobbes suggested a way out. People in the state of nature could make a social contract to put a strong leader, a sovereign, or perhaps a government in power over them to keep the peace. Individuals would join together and hand over many of their freedoms, most of them in fact. But it would be worth it to gain security and escape the terror of the war of all against all. The state could then rule with an iron rod if necessary, or a light touch if not. That's what Hobbes thought, and it's his justification for having a strong sovereign or government with extensive powers over the people. The trouble is, what you end up with may be peace, but at the cost of a frighteningly powerful state.
So what is the opposite of a society structured on the foundation of freedom? It is a society structured on the use of coercive force. Can you not see that there are only two creeds in the world possible for men? That there are only two sides on which a man can place himself? Are you for a free world, or for a world placed under authority? Are you a believer in force, or do you take your stand on the fixed and inalienable rights of the individual? Force used defensively to ward off aggression against one's person or property is almost universally accepted as necessary and justified. But in the modern world, most people accept an additional type of force as necessary, namely coercive force used by centralized governments in order to exert extensive top-down control of a society. But unlike force used defensively, there is not universal agreement as to whether centralized government force is necessary, justified, or whether it even contributes, rather than inhibiting, the order of a flourishing society. Some suggest that the massive centralized states that dominate our world are parasitic, and destined to destroy the societies which function as their hosts. The 19th century British philosopher Oberon Herbert was one individual who opposed the unchecked coercive force of modern governments. If coercive government need exist at all, then like many others in his day, Herbert believed they should be more decentralized, operate at a local level, and that the sole role of such governments should be to defend the individual against attacks on person or property, and that beyond that, government force has no place in a free world. That is the one and only one rightful employment of force in the defense of the plain, simple rights of liberty. Part of the reasoning behind his conviction was that once you grant a government the right to use force for purposes other than defending the simple rights of liberty, then a whole slew of perilous problems follow in the wake. The real danger begins where any body of persons, central or local, are equipped with powers which exceed those of the individual. Then we prepare for ourselves a formidable source of oppression, from which, as time goes on, it becomes more and more difficult to escape. The first danger of granting a government the ability to control us with force is that, like any occupation, politics attracts a certain type of personality. It is comforting to believe those attracted to politics are the best among us, and that the electoral system prevents megalomaniacs from attaining power. But the lessons of history suggest otherwise. Like moths to a flame, centralized governments attract authoritarian and narcissistic personalities who believe they know better than the rest of us, and who experience little remorse or guilt when they manipulate, deceive, lie, or use force to sculpt society in whatever manner they please. This is on full display in the modern world, as almost all politicians promise they will use the power of the state to remake the world in their image, while rare to non-existent are those who campaign to step aside and allow the individual the proper right to be free. Oberon Herbert served as a high-ranking member of the British Parliament for nearly 10 years, and as he wrote, "I saw that no guiding, no limiting or moderating principle existed in the competition of politician against politician, but that almost all hearts were filled with the old corrupting desire to possess that evil mocking gift of power, and to use it in their own imagined interest, without question, without scruple, over their fellow men." Another problem with granting a government the right to use force to sculpt a society is that it then becomes practically impossible to determine what the limits of these powers should be. If it is right to use unlimited power to take 1/10 of a man's property, is it also right to take 1/2, or the whole? If it is not right to take the half, where is the magical, undiscoverable point at which right is suddenly converted into wrong? If it is right to restrict a man's faculties in one direction, is it right to restrict them in half a dozen or a dozen different directions? Who shall say? It is a matter of opinion, taste, feeling.
There is an entire genre of YouTube videos devoted to an experience which I am certain that everyone in this room has had. It entails an individual who, thinking they're alone, engages in some expressive behavior, wild singing, gyrating, dancing, some mild sexual activity, only to discover that, in fact, they are not alone, that there's a person watching and lurking, the discovery of which causes them to immediately cease what they're doing in horror. The sense of shame and humiliation in their face is palpable. It's the sense of, this is something I'm willing to do only if no one else is watching. This is the crux of the work on which I have been singularly focused for the last 16 months, the question of why privacy matters, a question that has arisen in the context of a global debate enabled by the revelations of Edward Snowden that the United States and its partners, unbeknownst to the entire world, has converted the internet, once heralded as an unprecedented tool of liberation and democratization, into an unprecedented zone of mass indiscriminate surveillance. There is a very common sentiment that arises in this debate, even among people who are uncomfortable with mass surveillance, which says that there's no real harm that comes from this large-scale invasion because only people who are engaged in bad acts have a reason to want to hide and to care about their privacy. This worldview is implicitly grounded in the proposition that there are two kinds of people in the world, good people and bad people. Bad people are those who plot terrorist attacks or who engage in violent criminality and therefore have reasons to want to hide what they're doing, have reasons to care about their privacy. But by contrast, good people are people who go to work, come home, raise their children, watch television. They use the internet not to plot bombing attacks, but to read the news or exchange recipes or to plan their kids' Little League games. And those people are doing nothing wrong and therefore have nothing to hide and no reason to fear the government monitoring them. The people who are actually saying that are engaged in a very extreme act of self-deprecation. What they're really saying is, I have agreed to make myself such a harmless and unthreatening and uninteresting person that I actually don't fear having the government know what it is that I'm doing. This mindset has found what I think is its purest expression in a 2009 interview with the longtime CEO of Google, Eric Schmidt, who, when asked about all the different ways his company is causing invasions of privacy for hundreds of millions of people around the world, said this. He said, if you're doing something that you don't want other people to know, maybe you shouldn't be doing it in the first place. Now, there's all kinds of things to say about that mentality. The first of which is that the people who say that privacy isn't really important, they don't actually believe it. And the way you know that they don't actually believe it is that while they say with their words that privacy doesn't matter, with their actions they take all kinds of steps to safeguard their privacy. They put passwords on their email and their social media accounts. They put locks on their bedroom and bathroom doors. All steps designed to prevent other people from entering what they consider their private realm and knowing what it is that they don't want other people to know. The very same Eric Schmidt, the CEO of Google, ordered his employees at Google to cease speaking with the online internet magazine CNET after CNET published an article full of personal, private information about Eric Schmidt, which it obtained exclusively through Google searches and using other Google products. This same division can be seen with the CEO of Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg, who in an infamous interview in 2010 pronounced that privacy is no longer a, quote, social norm. Last year, Mark Zuckerberg and his new wife purchased not only their own house, but also all 4 adjacent houses in Palo Alto for a total of $30 million in order to ensure that they enjoyed a zone of privacy that prevented other people from monitoring what they do in their personal lives. Over the last 16 months, as I've debated this issue around the world, every single time somebody has said to me, I don't really worry about invasions of privacy because I don't have anything to hide, I always say the same thing to them. I get out a pen, I write down my email address, I say, here's my email address. What I want you to do when you get home is email me the passwords to all of your email accounts. Not just the nice, respectable work one in your name, but all of them. Because I want to be able to just troll through what it is you're doing online, read what I want to read, and publish whatever I find interesting. After all, if you're not a bad person, if you're doing nothing wrong, you should have nothing to hide. Not a single person has taken me up on that offer. I check that email account religiously all the time. It's a very desolate place. And there's a reason for that, which is that we as human beings, even those of us who in words disclaim the importance of our own privacy, instinctively understand the profound importance of it. It is true that as human beings we're social animals, which means we have a need for other people to know what we're doing and saying and thinking, which is why we voluntarily publish information about ourselves online. But equally essential to what it means to be a free and fulfilled human being is to have a place that we can go and be free of the judgmental eyes of other people.